Welcome to another Star Wars review. I'm Jon Berry, and today I shall be reviewing Star Wars: Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn. For some context, this book has two time frame settings. The earlier one is in the time set sometime after Ahsoka left the Jedi Order in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but still before Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The later time setting is after Star Wars Rebels Season 3, but before Star Wars Rebels Season 4, quite literally, it picks up probably, I would say, a couple days, maybe a week or so, after the end of Season 3, and probably ends with a couple days, a week, before Season 4 begins. That's how in between that later time setting is. The book jumps back and forth between the two time periods, and it's told from the perspective of a handful of characters, but remains in the third person. Those perspectives belong to Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, and Padme Amidala primarily, but also a few perspectives from some other characters. The only one I can think of, and I think it might be for total, but the only other character I can think of is Stormtrooper Commander Kimmund. I often find these types of stories to be confusing and disorienting, but it works here. It might be because it's a Thrawn book, so we expect higher levels of complexity, or it might be because the stories are told in a parallel manner and they progress at the same rate. They also, in the book, the stories are concluding at the same time, and they even come together through Thrawn referencing the past more and more at the end of the novel. But I'll save that for my discussion on this later on in my review. While this novel I think is shorter than Star Wars Thrawn, and it definitely felt that way, I found it to be equally impressive and enjoyable. I was entertained throughout reading the novel, and I was constantly trying to figure out which way the plot wanted to go, trying to put the pieces together, but I really could not figure it all out until the end. I wouldn't say the very end, but I would say about a chapter or two before the end, when everything started fully making sense, but even parts of it eluded me till Thrawn explained it, to put it simply. What I really liked about this novel is how Thrawn was treated as a character. Unlike the first novel, in which we had glimpses into Thrawn's thoughts through journal entries of his being read by Eli Vanto, we had actually very little insight into his thoughts, Thrawn's thoughts are being. They mainly come through in this novel when he voices them, or what Anakin/Vader senses through the Force, which was actually very little. Oh, and his body language as well. But above all, what I really liked about his characterization is what we learn about Thrawn. That being, he looks at the small details others will consider insignificant when figuring out the bigger picture. We even see this through his own actions when he says his mission comes first. Anakin and Padme took this to mean he was leaving and won't help them anymore, but what he really meant was that he would help them with their mission when he had completed his own. This is evident by the first in his mission comes first. This is something that Darth Vader figures out about Thrawn. Everything Thrawn realizes and observes is already there, and his explanations are always so simple and clear in hindsight. To put it another way, when Thrawn reveals something, you have an duh moment where you realize that was so obvious. Thrawn's mind is shown here to pick up and be conscious of the small details everyone else relegates to the back of their brain and to their subconscious, so they're not cognitively and consciously aware of it. Therefore, I have decided to give Thrawn Alliances a rating of 5 stars out of 5. That is a half star higher than what I gave Star Wars Thrawn. I found this novel to be easier to follow and read, despite the jumping around in time, than Thrawn. But my main reason for giving Thrawn Alliances an extra 1/2 star is because of how well this book works to explain Thrawn's thought process through the eyes of other characters, and thus making it easier for us, the audience, to understand Thrawn, which I believe this was all done very well. The rest of my review will have spoilers for the plot of Thrawn Alliances. Therefore, if you have not yet read the book and don't wish to be spoiled, save this video in your watch later playlist and go back and read the book. I highly encourage you to do so, as it was a great read. If you are still here, spoilers are inbound. To clarify a few things first, when I say past, I mean the storyline set during the Clone Wars, and the present, will refer to the time between Season 3 and 4 of Star Wars Rebels. I'm just giving you this so you guys can know what I'm using to address what, and so that way you understand my thought process. I'll begin my recap in the past. Padme is following a lead of one of her former handmaidens, Deja, something like that takes her to the planet Batu on the edge of the unknown regions. There she goes missing, and Anakin goes off to find her, of course without permission. And of course the entire time she has been taking care of herself just fine, as she investigates Separatist activity that takes her to the planet Mokjive. I honestly don't know how to pronounce it. If you're interested, it's spelled Mokivj. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it, so every time I have in my script here, I'm just going to say Mochikva or something like that. You know what I'm going for. When Anakin arrives on Batu, he meets Thrawn, and they work together to accomplish their respective missions. Eventually, they make their way to Mokjive, where they get captured on purpose, and they subsequently escape and run into Padme, who is on her way to break Anakin out of the factory's cell block. Thrawn steals the power generator of the factory, which was his mission, and his ship retrieves it. Anakin and Padme work together to sabotage the factory. Anakin then destroys another section of the factory where they can sabotage the manufacturing process. Anakin then destroys the nearby mine, but accidentally causes geological and environmental problems for Mokjive. The Separatist factory was manufacturing Cortosis armored B-2 battle droids and coating clone trooper armor in Cortosis as well. This may have been the first mention of Cortosis in canon, though I'm not sure. It is treated very similarly to its treatment in Legends in regards to its properties. It is still very rare, and I appreciate how they clarify how lightsabers interact, because in Legends it was not that consistent. Sometimes it would deactivate, sometimes it would just block. It was not always consistent. In canon, however, a lightsaber will deactivate when it comes into contact with the material. I like the explanation of how Cortosis dissipates energy or creates a feedback loop which will shut down a lightsaber, but is still vulnerable to an arc caster, because while the power setup is similar to a lightsaber, there are enough differences to allow an arc caster to damage Cortosis. To put it simply, the book has a better explanation. The mine that Anakin destroys is the Cortosis mine, and while he only wanted to collapse it, the properties of Cortosis channeled the energy of the explosives into the planet's mantle and caused lava to erupt, and smoke and lava damaged the planet's ecosystem. In a way, this book is using this one event as commentary on the collateral damage of war. In the present, Darth Vader knows that the whole operation of Mokjive was actually being orchestrated by Palpatine, who wanted clones of Cortosis armor to give them an edge during Order 66. This of course fails, and really that is a good thing, because then Yoda would not have been able to decapitate Commander Gree right before Gree was to shoot Yoda in the back during Order 66, and subsequently Yoda and Obi-Wan would never have been able to enter the Jedi Temple to reset the beacon that was calling all the Jedi to return to the temple into a warning beacon to stay away, because they had to fight through clones in order to do so. In the present, the Emperor tasks Darth Vader and Grand Admiral Thrawn to investigate a disturbance in the Force on Batuu. They travel to Batuu on board the Chimeras, which is Thrawn's flagship. But along the way they are pulled out of hyperspace, but they cannot find the cause and have to resort to traveling jump by jump, which increases their travel time significantly. They decide to travel via Mokchava because it would be a few hours shorter. There Thrawn notices that there are less than the 10 moons that should be there orbiting the planet, but it is only later when Thrawn and us readers realize why. On Batuu, Vader senses the disturbance in the Force, but it disappears. The Grisk are eventually revealed to be behind all of this. They have been using cloaked gravity wells that use kurtosis to create a power surge that activates the cloak as soon as the ship that's been pulled out of hyperspace is, well, pulled out of hyperspace. And they have been also kidnapping Chiss children, who are the Chiss's few Force sensitive. These Chiss serve as pilots and navigators for the Chiss, so that they do not have to travel jump by jump, and so that they can chart temporary hyperspace lanes. They are normally female, and they tend to lose their skill over time, which is unlike the Jedi and Sith, who typically grow in their strength over time. Though I am not sure which one of these two things were causing the disturbance in the Force. I'm not sure. Most of the other YouTubers I have watched the reviews are leaning towards these Chiss Force sensitive, but the book has it very unclear, and perhaps it is supposed to be up for interpretation. Darth Vader discovers that he can use the Force to navigate through hyperspace as well after Thrawn asks him to navigate the Chimera in this way. This Force power is very similar to the Jedi and Sith's ability to detect the oncoming of blaster bolts and other attacks, which this book terms double vision. Why, I don't know. It's precognition is all it really is. Thrawn also reveals to Darth Vader that the Chiss term for these specific children, Force-sensitive Chiss children, translate into basic as Skywalker. This makes me wonder, would we be seeing this Force technique be used for navigation in Episode 9 or another film sometime in the future, and it presents a new avenue for there to be more Skywalkers in Star Wars that are not part of the Skywalker family. It also makes me wonder if Anakin had a distant ancestor who served as a pilot and navigator who encountered a Chiss and got the last name that way, which I personally think would be more fascinating and way more exciting than how Han got his last name in Solo, a Star Wars story. Be sure to check out my review for Solo, by the way. This book strongly, I repeat strongly, implies that Thrawn has deduced the fact that Darth Vader was once Anakin Skywalker. While there is no direct confirmation of this, Vader believes that Thrawn knows, and for me, that's good enough. Throughout the book, Thrawn uses "we" whenever Darth Vader was present, and Darth Vader and Thrawn were present, and Thrawn was speaking of his mission with Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, rather than I. Thrawn and every time says that he misspoke, but I suspect he was actually doing it on purpose to gauge Vader's reactions. While it is never stated, I believe that Thrawn has figured out that Vader was once Anakin Skywalker. The book also states that Thrawn has sought up 3 ways to kill Vader. He does reveal this to Vader after Vader says that Thrawn, being a skilled tactician, must have sought up a way to kill Vader. While we have no idea what these ways are, it does show how brilliant of a tactician Thrawn is, that he has more than one way of doing so. I would expect that most Imperials would just use overwhelming force to kill Vader, and they would still fail. Tarkin and Thrawn might be 2 of the few that would manage to kill Vader, or at least result in a draw when and you got to exclude the Death Star and the Emperor, because they'll probably win most of the time. The book also reveals that Darth Vader has a personal detachment of Stormtroopers, which is called the First Legion, and that they are drawn from the ranks of the 501st. While I took note of the fact that first is spelled out, and it appears that the First Legion may not actually be a legion in size, but is one in name to make it sound more impressive. It is also revealed that some of its former commanders have either been killed by Vader or demoted and sent back to the 501st. We learn most of this through Stormtrooper Commander Kimmund, the current commander of the First Legion. We get to see his insights into Vader, Thrawn, and Rook. Working backwards from that list, Kimmund begins with a strong dislike of Rook, but by the end of the book, he respects Rook for Rook's skill in battle, and he is also jealous of Rook's personal cloaking device, wanting one for himself. I found it enjoyable to watch the change in attitude for Kimmund as the book progressed. Kimmund's thoughts of Thrawn before the mission in the book are unstated, but he did have a negative perception of the TIE Defenders because of what all the other Imperial officers were saying about them. But he changed his mind after seeing the Defenders in action. What is known is that Kimmund during the book respected and I should say maybe even respects Thrawn's leadership style. He appreciates how, while Thrawn valued results, he did not require perfection, and he even speculated in the book that if Thrawn's leadership style became the norm of the Imperial military, especially as those under Thrawn's command brought the leadership style to the new assignments, because as they advanced in rank, then the Empire could last forever. Which I think is true. I really do think is true. He also observed higher morale on the Chimera than other Imperial ships and units because there was less, backstabbing, I would say, to summarize. But we know that will never happen because the Empire does collapse, and Thrawn and the Chimera go missing at the end of Star Wars Rebels, so the prime example just disappears. As for Vader, we do not get much of Kimmund's thoughts regarding Vader beyond a general fear of failing Vader and getting demoted, or what he thinks is more likely, and probably is, to be killed by Vader for failing Vader. I got the impression that he would rather serve under Thrawn than Vader, which I would have to agree to, because I'd rather serve under Thrawn than Vader personally. The last thing that I want to discuss is the use of the TIE Defender in Thrawn Alliances. More specifically, I want to discuss Vader's thoughts on them. In the book, he gets to pilot a TIE Defender, and he compares it favorably to his personal and prototype, TIE Advanced X-1. In the end, he says that he will speak to the Emperor on behalf of the project. In a way, I think this might be a little bit of Anakin left in Vader that Vader also actively tries to suppress. Anakin loved flying starfighters, and Vader getting his hands on and flying one of the most well-balanced and powerful TIEs in the Empire might have been enough for a little bit of Anakin to peek out, but nothing that will force Anakin fully out until Luke, to put it simply, till Vader discovers that his son is alive. Vader even recommends making the TIE Defender faster and more armored as well, and simplifying the controls for the less skilled Imperial pilots that dominate the ranks of the Empire. Which we actually do get to see this faster and more armed Defender in Season 4 of Rebels. I like how that's all put together nicely. That concludes my review of Star Wars Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn. My question for you today is, what did you think of Star Wars Thrawn Alliances? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed my review, please like the video and subscribe to my channel for future Star Wars related content and more. Also consider following me on social media and supporting me on Patreon in exchange for extra and early content. Links are in the description. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you always.